Okay. Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening, everybody across the globe. And thank you again for joining in for this new webinar of the UNESCO Chair in Disaster Risk Reduction and Resilience Engineering. Today, we have the pleasure to introduce Horizon Europe project called MEDiate, which stands for Multi-Hazard and Risk-Informed System for Enhanced Local and Regional Disaster Risk Management. And the presenters for this webinar will be Dr. Abdelghani Meslem from NORSAR, which is the agency, the geophysical agencies of of Norway, and is the coordinator of the MEDiate project. Before we delve more into MEDiate, I would just like to remind you of some activity, which as usual, this one doesn't work. Yes, some activity of the UNESCO chairs, both past and future. So last month we had the Global Symposium on recent advancement and the way forwards in confined masonry construction practice, co-badged and co-sponsored by ERI, ARUP, Build Change, and Epicenter. The event saw the registration of 320 participants from 52 different countries, so it was really a global event. And we had more than 20 speakers contributing with various aspects of the construction and confined masonry and the issues with making it a more widely used construction mode, especially in developing country, looking at supplement the unreinforced masonry constructions that often occurs, and also necessarily not a standardized and not a sufficiently controlled and safe manners. There were more than 150 people tuning in at any given time, and we had very lively discussions and presentations, but the good news is that the activities do not stop there. You can find all the recording are available at on our website. As usually, we go to the UNESCO Chair educational activity, but you can also find all the PDF of the presentations at the link on the at this second link, where you would also find code standards that you can review for your practice if you are interested in designing and constructing in confined masonry. If you have questions, please send it to us and we will field it to the speakers. Most of the speakers are also contributing to a white paper which we will very shortly publish on the ERI. This will contain the discussions that that raised from the symposium and whatever, and the proposals for overarching activity on standardization of confined masonry. So if you want to participate and intervene, please get in touch. And also, if you are at the World Conference of Earthquake Engineering at the end of June, beginning of July in Italy, in Milan, we will also be there at the special session on confined masonry, coded as RES3. You can find, this will be chaired by Svetlana Brest and Fee Mart, and you can find more information at this link on the World Conference of Earthquake Engineering website. And now just a little announcement of upcoming webinars and courses. So in mid-April, in about a month, we will have a very interesting seminars led by colleagues from the Philippines, from Xavier University, Dr. Dexter Lowe and Professor Alessandro Garciano and Andy Oreta from University de La Salle in Manila. And they will talk about disaster resilience approaches and planning, so at national scales, and they will look at how far the Philippines has come in the last decade in this specific area of both societal and infrastructural resilience. And it will be a very interesting talk, considering that they are exposed not just to earthquake, but also to typhoons, to flooding, and various hazards, and to tsunami. The following month, in May, we will have a seminar on FAMIVE. FAMIVE is procedures that I developed over the past 20 years, which looks at failure mechanism identification and vulnerability evaluation, specifically for unreinforced masonry structures. We had some more recent development and turn it into a resource that you can use online. So there will be a presentation of the online resource and also applications at a larger scales in 3 different case studies in Spain, Italy, and Chile, looking at how this can be used to determine, again, fragility functions, vulnerability functions, and strengthening provisions at territorial scales. We will also have in May another seminars on MEDiate, so of which probably Dr. Meslem will tell us a little bit more in the following couple of hours. And then in June, we will have a presentation from Miyamoto International. We are still to finalize the subjects, but it will be on sustainable structural engineering and disaster management in general. So topical with respect to the activity of the UNESCO chairs. And in September, presentation from the Global Program for Safer School, managed by the World Bank. We will look at different school infrastructures management tools. And with this, I just want to very briefly introduce the speakers for today. Dr. Abdelghani Meslem he has a PhD from Chiba University in Japan, where he studies specifically aspect of seismic hazards. He then joined UCL in 2000, first University of Bath and then UCL in 2011 to work from 2011 to 2014 to work specifically on the GEM vulnerability model, together with myself and Professor Tiziano Rossetto and other research associates of the time. He then moved to NORCER directly from UCL, where he has been since, I think, 2014. And is now the senior researchers there, and he has coordinated 2 projects already from the Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe, the Turnkey, and then now the MEDiate project. So, of which you can find more information online at this particular website. UCL is one of the UCL and our team, it's one of the partners, and with this I leave Abdelghani to give you more insight on the project itself. Thank you. Abdelghani, to you.
Yes, yeah, just share screen again, back. Yes, I hope that you can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Hello.
Yes.
Is it?
You have just turned off your camera.
Yeah, just to see even better. Do you see the full screen or?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yes. Hi. Hello. My name is Abdelghani Meslem. I am senior research engineer at NOSAR, a research center in applied geohazard and seismology. I am the coordinator of MEDiate, the multi-hazard and risk-informed system for enhanced local and regional disaster risk management. So this will be a lecture one of a big European project. Is one of the first from the new program Horizon Europe project with 18 partners. So we have 18 partners in this project. And today is lecture number one, where I just present the overview about the project through this number of bullets, explaining what are the challenges that the project trying to address, challenges related to the disaster risk management. And then what are the defined objectives of the project. Then a quick presentation of the consortium, who we are, in order to address these objectives, what is our background and who are the partners, and then the test bed for which the different outcomes or different methodology that will be developed will be tested and evaluated, and then the key activities that are ongoing through the project. So I will start first quickly explaining why we are having this project. The reason we have this project is because, despite there is, we do know we have quite advanced in understanding modeling and forecasting of natural hazard and how they impact community infrastructures and populations, economy, environment. So, and still we do always record and observe losses for these different components. And if we look at the recent report, I'm talking about the report that was developed by the European Environment Agency, where they have shown that extreme natural events, especially those related to climate change, have caused a loss of economy of around €1 trillion over the past 40 years. On top of that, we have between 85 to 145,000 human fatalities, which has been recorded in Europe. When we look at the reason why we do have such impact, knowing that we have a good understanding, there are a number of reasons. One of them is the fact that different risks are usually, in most of the case, tackled following a single risk approach, where, for example, in different phase of the process, if we look, for example, the analysis of climate scenario to local adaptation process, are often addressed separately, and flood, for instance, and drought are not considered with an integrated approach. So this basically, it reflects the fact there is no efficient collaboration between different technical agencies as well as governmental agencies. Each agencies is tackling a given risk or a given hazard separately without coordination with the other potential hazard that may have kind of connections. The other challenge is related to the fact that vulnerability and risk analysis are not really performed from a multidisciplinary perspective, integrating physical, economy, and social impact altogether. But we see that we analyze the physical impact alone, and then the economy impact alone, and the social impact alone. So they are not really tackled altogether. On top of that, we can add, for instance, the issue of the compounding and cascading effect of hazard. Even though we do have a clear, extensive review and observation, but still not regularly included within risk and resilience assessment. So all this basically as a consequence, this is why we see the decision makers struggle to understand all these changes and impact, and then basically failing to successfully implement an adaptation or an impact mitigation strategy. So if the main objective of the project is to basically enhance the modeling of risk to built environment and people. And this is done through two main bullets. One is to develop an integrated, resilience-informed, service-oriented and people-centered approach that account for forecasted modification in exposure. This is an important component, as well as changes in the vulnerability. So this is the bullet number one. And the second one is to have an integrated risk and resilience assessment framework that account for cascading impact. That's one of the reasons why we see this damage and it's amplified to natural environment. So the third one, one of the main product of or outcome of the project will be to develop an assessment framework, which is a web-based service for decision support system that will be readily adapted for various end users. As you can see, it's a system where different stakeholders can communicate and exchange and understand each other. This is one of the challenge that they also have been facing for the past event, to have a platform where they can use the results, scientific results, into action, and then they can implement it in reality so that they can have a more efficient collaboration and more efficient response in order to mitigate the potential risk. What is this system? This system will have, it's a framework that will have three main protocols. The first one will be a dynamic and risk framing system that can effectively address the decision-making needs and actor in disaster management, policymaker. So different players, different actors. It's all about defining the needs. So here the decision makers or the different actors in disaster management can define their needs with respect to, in order for them to have the proper action implemented. And the other protocols is the one that enable different decision makers to tolerate the analysis and visualization in line with their specific priority and preferences. We have different stakeholders, different actors. Each one has different priorities and preferences. And this is an important aspect that the framework we'd like to develop to have and take into consideration. Then if we look at the last protocol, or the third protocol, is allowing the users to visualize all the components of disaster risk and resilience and the effect of their action on possible scenarios, how this affect a given mitigation strategy, how this affect the different response, and also how this is changing over the time. This is the overall main component or main protocol of the product, the main product of the project that will deliver at the end of the project. So to do this is, as you see, it's multidisciplinary based project that requires a lot of effort, a lot of knowledge, and interaction between different researchers and different players in disaster risk management. So we are a consortium that consists of 18 partners from Norway, Netherlands, Austria, France, Italy, Iceland, and the United Kingdom. So 8 research centers and industry. We have 6 universities, and plus we have 4 local and regional authorities. So this is the whole consortium that we are working together in order to deliver the solution that we are proposing to address the issue of risk governance. So in the consortium, we have, as I said, a multidisciplinary team. We have a representative scientific area, meteorological, we have environment, geophysical scientists, civil and risk engineers. We have also the social scientist, information technologist, economist, disaster risk managers, plus other potential stakeholders who may be involved in the project, helping in providing feedbacks during national workshops, stakeholder workshop that we are organizing across different test beds. It's 3 years duration project, will be started last year, October, 2 years, in October 2020, and will finish in September 25. So the project has defined 8 main activities that we are ongoing. So this is the activities that will be later, as Dina showed in the timetable, that there will be next MEDiate. Each time one of this technical activity will be presented in much details. So today for me is just to provide an overview of those activity. It's just a summary what this activity is about, but then there will be lecture for each of those activities that provide in much more details. So we have, as I said, 8 main activities. The activity 1 is looking at the multi-hazard interactions. This is this to account for the interaction of the different hazard or triggered hazards. And then the second technical activity is the cascading multi-hazard risk. The third one is the multi-hazard indicators that will be then taken in order to be used in the system for decision support system. And then we have the activity that looks at the multi-hazard physical vulnerability for not for only individual component, but also to a system. We have the socio-economy vulnerability, and then we have the risk and resilience metric, and the integrated risk and resilience assessment framework, and finally the main product of the project, which is a web-based MEDiate DSS platform that will be delivered, and normally it's designed to be used by different end users. So this is the main activity. I will, as I said previously, we are developing these solutions and testing it, evaluating with the different stakeholders through national and regional workshop with stakeholders in 4 test beds. We call them test bed or pilot site. One is in the city of Oslo in Norway here. The other is in Nice, Côte d'Azur in France. The third one is in Essex, County Council. And the last one is Molapin in Iceland. So these are our 4 test beds where we are running, evaluating and collecting feedback for the development of the different solutions. The reason of selecting of those test beds, it's one is because geographically they are different. The population, number of populations different, culture different. The system is different, but also they are all have experienced a number of severe and extreme natural hazard. For example, this is an example of multi-hazard event in Norway. It was in 1987. It was quite a strong storm in Oslo, and which has caused major flood damage, storm damage, and then it was like a 30-day period with up to 240% of normal rainfall, which was followed by a period where maximum daily rainfall had a occurrence interval of 10 to 15 years. This was quite huge and led to a flood and yeah, as I said, it was a lot of damage combined with other triggered risk, like spread and wind condition led to particular large flood along the coast. So this is all also other triggered hazard from the man hazard, which was the rainfall. So this is the Oslo, and then also the same thing that we have observed also in that has been recorded for Nice, a flood and landslides in the event of 2020. So was just recent one. So also was extreme rainfall, and also for the Essex, they had also flood, extreme rainfall and flood, and also we had the wildfire event that occurred in 2022 in August. So this has been like 2 years ago. And then finally also in Iceland, it's a small town which also have experienced the number of extreme natural hazard events. So you see, they are quite different. We wanted to test our system that we want to develop under different conditions. A condition where you have very dense population and less population, medium to really less population, like in the case of this small, very, very small town. And also the system, the disaster management system that they have, all these test beds are quite different. So it will be interesting to see how this impact the efficiency as well as the outcome of the assessment. So I will start with the first one. Just to, as I said, it will be just an introduction of what this activity about. Starting with the multi-hazard, which is about moving from looking at single hazards to multi-hazard thinking, and this is important. And it means that we need to understand which multi-hazard are the most important and impactful across Europe or across the given site of interest. What are the primary interaction and the relationship between hazards? And then we need also to know how climate and impact models simulate multi-hazard relationships. And finally, how to say, yeah, we need to know which condition led to this multi-hazard event. Yeah. So this is about to generate critical new methods in this activity. So they are working to generate new critical methods, evidence, and knowledge related to multi-hazard interaction and cascading impact in the Europe context. Or regional context. So, but we are looking at the Europe context. We are selecting 4 test beds that represent more or less the north and south of Europe. Yeah. So, so the first part, the critical new method, evidence and knowledge. So here is about generalized method and knowledge for Europe rather than just test bed specific results. So it is more generalized that we are working on. The interaction, how the different hazard interact. This is also something that will be we are looking at. And also finally, we for this part is how for the cascading impact, how do the impact of one hazard cascade? So you have one hazard will lead to others. So how this will cascade, and in terms of hazard, in terms of as well as in terms of risk. So this is the first one, and then we have also is about also to create new multi-hazard indicators that will support risk-based assessment, including the decision support system that we are working to develop. So for the multi-hazard indicators, this is about how should hazard be characterized. So there will be indicators that will allow us to characterize those different hazards, and then also with respect to support risk-based assessment. So this is about to focus in. The focus will be on the hazard, but also to support the goal of of your project or the goal of your action that you want to do. So this is something that that is considered also in this part. We have so through the 4 test beds that I mentioned, there has been quite a very long investigation, long interaction with the stakeholders, local authorities, and in general, all the actors in disaster management. And the aim of this interaction was to define what natural hazard of interest for those test beds. And then this is just a result, an overview that you can see each test bed has a given focus. Some of them, they focus more on forest fire, flood, earthquakes, others more flood, landslide, storm. Yeah, and then you have different type of hazard that they want to be addressed in this project. But we have through this activity, there has been a lot different type of I would say a sub activity in order to define and select the most appropriate hazards, especially those who are cascading. They are I mean, they can create the cascading impact of it. So so the first one was to work on the interacting hazard type. And here we have 4 interacting hazard type that have been identified. And what those interacting hazard, they are basically highlighting the interconnectedness, dependencies, and compounded risk that can arise from the simultaneous occurrence, proximity, or prior condition associated with the hazard event. So if we look at the first one, which is let me the precondition and triggering. Here we are talking about in a preconditioning event, one or more hazard can cause an impact or can lead to an amplified impact only because of a pre-existing or, let's say, climate-driven condition. And then you have the multivariate event, which refer to the co-occurrence of multiple climate drivers or hazard in the same geographical region, causing an impact. Usually in such condition or such events, multiple drivers can cause one or more hazards, like you can see, or alternatively, a single driver can cause a multiple correlation hazard. Yeah. And then for the temporarily compounding event, which refer to a succession of hazards that affect a given geographical region, leading or maybe amplifying and an impact when compared with a single hazard. And here the hazards are promoted by one or more drivers, which in turn are caused by modulators. Yeah. So, and finally, the fourth one, which is the spatially compounding event, which occur when multiple connected locations are affected by the same or let's say different hazard within a limited time window, which basically thereby causing an impact, right? Yeah. So usually and then you have here the compounding event consists of multiple. As we can see, so it's multiple climate-driven or multiple hazard, as it is illustrated by the green and the blue boxes. And then they can basically potentially cause also the impact, like it's showed in the box, the red box that we can see here. So and this figure shows the shows here how the 4 interacting hazard type have been quantified for the case study for our that was conducted in this project, and this will be later by the other presenter of lecture number 2 will go into detail explaining all this part of how we quantify in order to account for this different hazard types that was conducted in this project. So if we look back again to the different hazards of interest that have been shown by the that was identified based on interaction with the stakeholders. And then here you can see that we have assigned the typology of the hazard, whether it is multi-variant or preconditioned or triggering. So all this hazard has been assigned, and then we used let's say an interaction matrix in order to select some of those, because we had to select the most predominant one of them, especially those who can create cascading. So we have implemented hazard interaction matrix, where you can see here it's defined. So these columns here, it defined a different hazard group that we know from the geophysical, hydrological, shallow or atmospheric, biophysical, and space. So there are all these different hazard, the primary hazard we call them. And then for all this hazard, we assigned the multi-hazard type that we have identified, the 4th hazard type that we have identified. And then from there, we can see each one of the symbols that represent one of these 3, one of those multiple hazard hazard type. Yeah. So you can see here. So and then basically the color here, it shows the nature of the secondary hazard. So the shape, it's more hazard type, and the color is the level of the secondary hazard that may occur. And then based on this, the combination of these two, something here went wrong. But anyway, the combination of these two allows us between the secondary hazard on top and the primary hazard on top, we can then identify which the hazard level we can take for a given site. And this is basically let us to identify the to complete the process of identifying the multi-hazard of importance for each test bed. So by combining the primary and the secondary hazard, the primary and secondary hazard as shown before. So from here, then we started looking, for example, for Oslo. If we look, for example, the compound float, this is the working case of Oslo, where we have looked at the. So here we have looked at the historical, but also looking at the scenarios with respect to flood and the triggered flood, for instance. So here it shows this slide, for example, it shows the historical landslide event in Oslo that were linked to extreme rainfall occurring in summer and autumn. Yeah, this is something. And you can see here the probability of, also they have the issue of the quicklay. The probability of a quicklay landslide event is notably high when it comes to wet summer. So in Oslo, there is a part in Oslo which is quicklay prone region. Quicklay is it's close to liquefact. When it is wet, then it is basically, it loses the strength, and then it become quite not stable. This is one of the major hazard in some of the region in Norway. So we can see for this different scenario. And also we can also look another scenario, which is it's the compounding flood event, and we can see the frequency and severity of this flood event are expected to rise in the future. Here is more looking at the future. So, and we can see how they can rise. For example, this is a scenario that we run for the 2050. So this kind of future scenario reveal that there will be like kind of increase in flood depth and extent, particularly for riverine flooding. Yeah. So so this is the overall summary of the multi-hazard interaction that is work undergoing. So I will go to the next one, which is now summarizing about the cascading multi-hazard risk, the assessment of the cascading impact of interacting hazard. So it is basically, we have two things when it comes to cascading effect, cascading impact. So when a hazard occurs, then there is a direct hazard impact. For example, here we are having like an example of a flood, coastal flood. If it happens, then it will directly impact power supply system. And it can also impact road network. So this is what we call the direct hazard impact. But then there is kind of interdependency. For example, for the power supply, we have the healthcare, hospitals, schools, population, residential, they all depend on the power supply. So, and then if the power supply is affected, then they are also affected. And this is what we call the cascading impact. So how this propagate. And this is something that have always been raised by the stakeholders. So they were always asking us, how can we address these things? Because we know when hazard occur, we know what's the direct, but what they don't know is how this propagate over the time and how this affect the other interdependency components like healthcare, school, population, as I showed. And this is why we have this as a main activity in the project. And then as a working example here, we have, we are selecting Oslo again. So, and we are assuming a flood impact to power supply. So these are the power supply in green circle. So, and then we run one of the scenarios, which is a flood. And then from here, we can see, for instance, which power supply is affected, directly affected by the floods. Okay, so it's just an assumption that, for example, water depth, if it's greater than 0.3 meter, then there is a damage, and the damage obviously will create cascading effect. If it's less than 30 meters, 0.3 meters or 30 centimeters, then it's no damage. So this is just a simplified assumption. But and then from here we need to understand how this can be affecting the other component, interdependency components that we want to see. And then if, for example, so if we want to do now, we want to look at the cascading impact from the loss of the power supply by considering the station that has been affected, right? So here, if I take this zoom for this, here is the area. So I can see the yellow area, it shows the area that is influenced by the direct impact of the stations or substations. So the red shows only the substations that are directly affected by the flood. And the gray is the flood, the scenario flood that we did before. So from here we can if we go into details, because then we want to see which of this can be affected. Then here, for instance, we can see all those who are in all these are in green, they are school, and then you have the hospital, residential buildings. So here we can see all the components that have been indirectly affected by the flood that was directly affecting the power supply. So this is the assumption, or this is the procedure that we are working. And from here, we can evaluate what are the number of hospitals that are indirectly impacted by the flood. We can also see the schools that also indirectly impacted. Number of people who lives there, it lives in the house, or they are working, or in the school, and then residential buildings that are indirectly impacted. So from here, we can then evaluate the cascading by looking at the impacts. So we can know actually how the community is affected, and probably also for how long, if it is connected to timing. So the third technical activity, it is focusing on multi-hazard indicators. As I said, the indicators is a criteria or a criterion that a criterion or that will be used to help or guide, develop, and test multi-hazard and to also to be used for risk-based assessment and decision making. So by definition, the indicator or criterion is a characteristics or a sign that is used to distinguish a thing, a concept, or to make a judgment. So it is a measurable associated with a criterion. It tended to observe its evolution. As also, it can be quantitatively to be quantitative, semi-quantitative, or qualitative. So these are the indicators that we are working on. And basically, you have data, and then from this data, we need to identify what are those indicators that can be measurable, that can be used for decision making. And from there, we come for the risk and resilience. So the data, for instance, if we look at this example, is the precipitation, temperatures, wave, and any scenario. And then from there, you have a multi-hazard and cascading impact assessment. Then your indicators, it will be, for example, it's water depth, okay, or number of days or return periods. These are all component or factor that can be used as indicators. So this is something that you can define, depend on how they can depend on the level or the intensity or the frequency of a given multi-hazard or cascading impact, yeah? And then you can evaluate the risk and resilience assessment. And then from there, you can go to direct physical impact, social impact, and impact matrix. What you can use then after that, because this is the hazard, but then you need to have the exposure asset, a stakeholder needs, and for that you need what we call storyline, multi-hazard storyline development. What is storyline? It's kind of I can say, for example, it's climate storyline developed for a chain of climate-related event. A story and data that shows, for example, cause effect over a period of time, for example. Let's say working with a societal stakeholder, scientist. It is important to use this kind of storyline to convey a complex issue and also to get them engaged, but also to have scientifically a robust scientific way. So it's very important to define this kind of storyline that allows them to really understand the concept. And from there, you can get your objective information that will be used to distinguish a thing or an object that you want to reach. And then you work with communicating to be understood, also highlighting the hypothesis and the casualties. So this is the indicators also. So it's all about, as I said, it's a factor that you define. There is no like a specific guideline for this, but this is also depend on the type of the natural hazard that you want to consider. So the next technical activity that we are doing is related to vulnerability of component and system. I guess it's very clear why we are talking about this system, because if you want to consider the cascading, then it's important also to know the vulnerability of the system, and instead of just the components, either at one single level of infrastructures or element or physical element, or at the network system or network level. Sorry. So in physical vulnerability of individual component or system, so there are, let's say, a number of activity which are carried out. And this include the screening, scoring, and selection of vulnerability and fragility model from the test bed that we have considered in this study. And also for different element exposed to the considered hazard that, the hazard that we are considering in the study. And the selected, for example, the selected model for building, bridge, for road segment and component of electricity network, and also networks such as transmission towers. All this is we are working to get and to select. We are also working on the collection of vulnerability model being scored based on criteria proposed by Gentile et al. So and this is criteria that allow us to select the most useful model for each of the exposed element hazard test based combination. So we have the one of the scoring area relevant is the geographical area. So in order to account for the specific context of each test bed. And then also we have a model that are selected for each test bed or for multi-hazard, but without considering the joint hazard, for example, loading. So here we can see the other sub-activity in this main activity of the physical vulnerability. It also includes the application of the Parnassus vulnerability index approach, where the flood vulnerability of, for example, here we have an example of masonry is characterized. So we have applied this this approach for the case of flood susceptibility in the project. This is in test bed in Nice test bed in France. With respect to this kind of approach, the relative vulnerability of individual building it's determined based on a number of parameters concerning the building itself and its surrounding, right? So in the case study presented here, so the parameters are characterized as district or a continuous continuous distribution based on virtual data collection that we got, or a sample of a building used, and that are available, freely available for a given geographical area. And then we use this kind of information to estimate the vulnerability and try to simulate a building population representative through a given region. And for this case, for example, it was for the masonry building. here, for instance, we show the high fidelity physics-based model for the case of reinforced concrete, for instance, building that are common in NIST test bed also. So the aim of doing this kind of process to allow us to develop a new analytical fragility model in the case of cumulative hazard loading. So in order to account for the cumulative. So here you can see that the structural models are so they are designed or used in simulation with this sequential loading. So they can be used for representing, for example, earthquake or representing earthquake or flood action. Yeah, here this is the last part of the physical vulnerability modeling, which was about to develop a novel framework for multi-hazard life cycle consequences analysis. And this in order to account for deteriorating engineering system. For example, you have a building or infrastructure component which separate the modeling of hazard event and the impact. So we need to account for this kind of deteriorating system. So we use this in order to re-estimate the level of the vulnerability for given components or given structures. So this kind of framework allow for to assess the consequences of progressive or enhancement in the condition of the engineering system, especially when it comes to the infrastructure. And then especially when we are considering, for example, the repairing activity. You know, when you have a damage that happen in infrastructures, then you conduct kind of repair process, and then you want to re-estimate how this can have the impact in terms of the level of the vulnerability. And then we try also to integrate uncertainty linked to the repair duration associated with the diverse limit state, for example, or performance level. The group who are working on this physical vulnerability have demonstrated the framework using real as well as synthetic graders. And also some kind of simplified simplified approach for the road network. So like it showed. And I think we are here at the socio-economic vulnerability. It's another technical activity that is an ongoing activity, and basically the social vulnerability, it's a characteristics of a person or group and their situation that influence their capacity to anticipate or cope with, resist and recover from the impact of a natural hazard. It is important to know who is impacted and how. So so to create an effective risk reduction policy that promote equity, it's crucial to comprehend why some individual or group are more vulnerable than others. So additionally, it's important also to assess the spatial distribution of socially vulnerable community. And this helps to identify connections. For example, if we consider a given flood-prone area, so then we can evaluate the societal impact of the natural hazard. Here we analyze how, for example, specific population characteristics influence vulnerability to natural hazard and adaptation for climate change. So, and then from there we reach to identify. We show this result of the social vulnerability in terms of social vulnerability index. There are other factors that we can consider in order to classify the level of vulnerability in terms of socio-economical. And so following this concept, this is an example of the same test bed in Oslo, where we have evaluated the social vulnerability index, or what also called adaptation vulnerability index for the site. And then basically this will be the, so this will be the input. So here we can clearly see how this kind of presentation, the vulnerability of this kind of presentation can show the vulnerability of population, how it can varies within a region, you see, showing that there are factors in certain municipalities that make people prone to disproportionately suffer from the natural hazard than others. So this is an important parameters, or an important observation that it is that to be considered. So so if we look at the variable considered for the social vulnerability index, we have considered children, adolescent, elderly, female average gross income for the adolescents, females as well, elderly. For example, a person living alone, couple living with young children, single parents with young children, multi-family household with young children. All these are parameters that have been considered, or that has been considered in order to identify the level of social vulnerability index, or to assign the social vulnerability index for a given region. For the adaptation vulnerability index, we have also considered the children, elderly, average gross income, average gross income also for the elderly people, person living alone or couple living with young children, single parent with young children, multi-family household, with young children. So this is all factors that has been considered. So once we have this social vulnerability index, and then which is basically, I will call it as a step one. It's all about modeling of the interacting physical infrastructure system and the social network. So we connect those social vulnerability with the network, with the given network, in order to see this enter the dependency between them. And then from there we can, for a given scenario, like I showed in the earlier, a flood, for example, that affect, let's say, power supply, then we disaggregate the impact as function of social economy and demographic feature. For example, here it showed in terms of loss ratio, but also it can show in terms of expected fatalities. And then here we are, for example, here the plot is only in terms, for example, the income, low income, middle income, high income, but you can consider other factors, for the other indexes. So and these are different scenario. We have a number of scenarios that you can see how important it is to ensure that there is equality in terms of safety between the different people with different income and condition. And the way how we did it, basically, it's just for a given station or substations. So you identify, this is just to repeat what just saw. So you identify those who surround, they depends on a given station or substation and how they are affected. And then you can end up by having the graph as I showed earlier, right? Now after this, so once we have finished with So we have identified the multi-hazard, and from the multi-hazard there is a technical activity that identify the cascading resulting from this multi-hazard interaction. And then from this, you come up with the indicators. These indicators for the multi-hazard will be combined with, so you have the indicators, and you have the vulnerability, and then you have the social economy vulnerability. So those three, when they are combined, then we end up by a result related to the risk and resilience metrics. So this is basically the outcome of what is above, yeah. And so as it's written here, risk and the resilience metrics are formal summarize. It's a basic summarize of physical effect and social effect of multi-hazard. So they enable us to represent the impacts or consequences of a given natural hazard event or natural hazard events in different ways. And this can be, I'm sure that you already know, they can be presented, those metrics, in terms of repair cost, number of displaced people, or number of job lost. So these are all different information, and those kind of information depends on what type of stakeholder is using this information. As I said, different stakeholders have different preferences. They are looking at different results depending on what type of activity they are doing. So so we need to characterize how we do this characterizing risk and resilience metric. So first we need to determine damage to the physical environment using information on physical vulnerability. So then what we do is we need to determine how that damage affect the lives of people and their social infrastructure. And then finally, we can then all of this information is it's kind of synthesized to produce various risk and resilience metrics. So this is the whole concept. And then basically here we have different features that can be disaggregated by various demography or socioeconomic factor like income for the risk and resilience, characterized for various policies, for instance, risk mitigation strategies that influence the physical and social effect of multi-hazard. Also, we have characterized for various future temporal instance depending on the physical and social information use, right? And here, so this is here we have this the proportion of the population displaced metric, which is disaggregated by income and hypothetical quantified for various different policies. This table here, you can see from the table, policy number 1, policy and policy 3 focus on, for example, the present physical and social environment, while the policy 2 focuses on future physical development. And all these policies are part of feature or preferences that stakeholders is defining in the system to generate this kind of presentations. So they are basically preferences from the end user or stakeholders to come up with such results. Then about facilitating disaster risk management. So the risk and resilience metric act as I can say as a criteria in decision-making algorithm of the DSS. So we have a DSS. So then the values of the values of the risk and the resilience metric obtained for different policies and policy and strategy, it will help us to determine the optimum one to be implemented for mitigation risk. And here again, is based on the preferences, configuration and preferences from the end users. So this is the whole process of the risk and resilience metric that the group in for the technical activity 6 is working on. Now we go to integrated risk and resilience assessment framework. Basically, we have 3 main key activities in here. So the first one is the risk and resilience identification, as it is, you can see here, where it's about to identify source of risk and resilience deficit. Also the relationship between source, impact, action, and interventions. Then you have the risk and resilience analysis. This is about vulnerability analysis, like we have seen, likelihood analysis, impact analysis, risk and resilience analysis, intervention analysis. We can also include the uncertainty analysis. And finally, we have the policies and intervention. So this is something that it's a multi-criteria decision-making process. So this is the integrated risk and resilience. This is the framework that that the group is working on. What are the main features of the framework? So that is proposed for the framework proposed for the integrated risk and resilience assessment for disaster risk reduction. So this framework actually can help the stakeholders to better understand not only layers of information from various sources and stage of disaster event, but also to establish a comprehensive risk and resilience landscape. Yeah, and also to the explicit consideration of the interrelationship between the source of risk and impact. For example, the cascading impact due to the interaction, and the interrelationship between mitigation action and source, as well as between mitigation action and impact to facilitate the decision making. And the third or last main feature is the fact that the proposed framework actually it recommends a detailed analysis. So it allows a detailed analysis to help stakeholders increase their confidence in the risk assessment and gain a more comprehensive understanding of the characteristics of the risk, and thus improve the decision making in disaster risk reduction. Here, what is important to mention is an important step is to have stakeholder engagement, and this is really crucial through the integrated risk and resilience assessment framework. As we saw that a lot of these main features, they really depend on stakeholders' input. So we need to ensure that all relevant aspects are addressed. And to do that, you need stakeholder engagement, and also to ensure support for the output and commitment to further actions in disaster risk reduction. Also, when discussing, especially when discussing with the key player in disaster management, like local authority who are in charge of disaster management, or operators of infrastructures, about all the possible catastrophic event and subsequent consequences, impact, particularly just on the critical social functionalities, and also in the different set of in the future and set of different set or challenging narrative about the future. This is something that it needs to be created. So it's more about this storytelling process that helps to better develop the backdrop for strategy plan for disaster risk management, because then it allows us to better see what needs to be taken into account for generating or running risk and resilience assessment framework. Here, this is an example of this is a table that we did it thanks to stakeholder engagement. This is a table that is about focusing on individual societal values. And for risk and resilience assessment, we have the likelihood analysis, the likelihood of occurrence of the triggered the triggered event in a year. So we can see it's very small with high uncertainty due to the complex interaction of here when we considered the case of earthquake and quickly. We can also see the impact analysis, and we can see that the table also show that the overall impact of trigger event is very large, particularly in terms of life and health. So the economy also, and we have also the social stability. The final thing is it's consider the uncertainty analysis. So this is an important, because then it allows us to like here, for example, we can see that the uncertainty of likelihood analysis is large due to the limited historical data of triggering event. And also we can see that the uncertainty of the uncertainty of impact analysis is generally moderate, as we have a good knowledge of the exposure and vulnerability in the study area. We have also this table that allows us to it's about to evaluate the potential stress and critical societal function as shown in this table. So we are focusing on infrastructure resilience with considering the impact or the interruptions and impact for this table. So so for the impact analysis of the infrastructure, so where the event pose generally very large stress on basic emergency preparedness, particularly on emergency services, water and sanitation. We have also the power and power supply and transport, and the uncertainty analysis. This is about uncertainty of impact or the uncertainty of impact analysis, which is generally moderate, as we have a good knowledge of the exposure and vulnerability in the study area. So This kind of results actually set the basis for policy and intervention, and also it helps to raise situational awareness and improve disaster management. So this is why we have generated this kind of information to improve to better evaluate a given mitigation strategy impact. So as I said, the main outcome of the project, or one of the main outcome of the project, is the web-based MEDiate decision support system platform. So this is the system where we are integrating the different components, methodology, methods, and framework that has been developed, integrating into one place, or integrate them and compile them in one web-based system or platform. This is a figure that shows a logic diagram. So and here we can clearly see the main specifics of the platform, which are the creation of the scenario, right? Scenario-based to integrate the hazard, exposure, vulnerability information of physical and social components, to compute and visualize the physical and social risk, right? And then, so this can show a clear visualization of the physical and it shows a clear visualization of the physical and social interdependency between the exposed and damaged asset to assist the decision-making process. And also another main specific of the system is we have this implementation of automated disaster mitigation algorithm. So the system or this platform, it has been it's actually following, we are following the concept of co-development in synergy with the decision makers, because then we know that the end user can easily simulate action and observe their impact on the risk and resilience metrics. So they are the one who helping in designing the whole system, so that they can use it, they can understand all the three, all the aspect or specifics of the system. It shows this is from the home, the web-based home page, where end user can enter in the computation of risk and mitigation action for each of one of the test beds. So the 4 test beds, the partners or the stakeholders in 4 test beds can easily connect here and then provide conduct computation. So this is the way how they are actually testing the system and providing a feedback. We can also see, for example, this here layers, tab layers, where the end user can upload baseline line information that could be useful to decision makers, although they are not processed by the platform engines. But yeah, these are just an example. It's still under development, an example of layers that can be entered. And then we can also go to the exposure, for instance. Yeah, where the platform presents a functionality to upload the data and exposed asset. So this functionality it has been developed in order to enable the end users of the testbed already contemplate in MEDiate to update their exposure and also to other exploitability of the project results. to new testbeds. So we can also see here the hazard part. So here also there are functionality to upload the different hazards, single triggering and combine hazards. So this functionality has been developed in order to enable also the end users can update their hazard data. As an example, you can see here, you can read that the coastal riverine, different type of information that can be easily updated. And maybe this is the final one where, before the final one, yeah, here is the type for risk. Once the exposure and hazard has been made available through the platform, then it's easy to, or it's possible to run analysis and compute loss in terms of economy, loss in terms of social impact, population. Also, with the run scenario, losses are also computed for single hazard. It is then possible to run cascading and to combine loss. So here, this is just yeah. It is it's an example of output that shows, for example, scenario map that has been considered, and also the affected population, how the results. So they can have a different type of plotting. I think with this I have finished the first lecture with the 68 slides.
Thank you very much, Abdelghani. Maybe you can switch on your camera now. Thank you very much. This is very interesting talk, and clearly the project is quite a complex project, as we knew already, spanning from the identification of the hazards, or the multiple different hazards at a particular location, all the way through to the characterization of the consequences and the impacts on individuals and societal groups, considering the interaction and the cascading effect on systems and individual components. So plenty to look into it, plenty to define and work together, and finally present an interactive system that what Abdelghani has just shown there, that should be easy enough to operate for local authority to start thinking and forecasting their intervention and their planning in terms of risk mitigation. Thank you again, Abdelghani. There are a few questions. So please, if anybody wants to comment, also maybe I've seen that there are some of our partners on the projects are in the audience. So if you have any comments, any specification that you want to give, please raise your hand. If others, colleagues and participants have any other question, please either put it in the question and answer area or in the chat. We have a first question which relates to the hazards. The hazards were presented as modulators and drivers at the beginning of the presentations. And Sohail Hassan would like to have more clarification of what a modulator is. What is the definition of the modulator? I've noticed that Chris is also in the audience. Maybe Chris, if you want to respond yourself, I can. Chris White. No, otherwise.
So the modulators that, for example, are those who can, for instance, influence the frequency, magnitude, and location of the drivers. Basically, possibly also change hazard frequency and intensity. We know that, for example, climate change can affect all elements contributing to a compound event that is, and this is what the modulars, drivers and hazard, yeah. So it's more those who are affecting a given to define the. They are parameters that they define as hazard scenarios.
Okay, thank you very much. And we have another questions about the how are they, well, there are another 2 or 3 questions, sorry. Let me just go back to the previous one. I will take them in order of appearance. So questions from Abdul Wahid. How the capacity are assessed in the model and in order to determine what are important component of risk assessment. So how do we basically select which path to go through in the risk assessment procedure?
Okay. So first, this depend on the type of hazard that is considered, as well as what type of the cascading that is triggered because of the given hazard. It's true that well, what is it? Chris says I have no way to talk. By the way, okay. It's what is it? Oh, yeah. Okay.
Don't worry. I will take care of that. Just okay. Answer the question.
So yeah. So the capacities are so it's a qualitative or quantitative parameters that you define for a given structure or system or components. The project is not focusing on developing the capacity, but is more focusing on using what is already estimated for different components. But it's still there is no like a definitive process for modeling or defining the level of capacity without considering the possibility of there is huge uncertainties on this. So it's also, yeah, it depends what hazard and cascading we need to do for the risk assessment. If he can, this Abdullah Wahid, repeat his question and be more precise what he meant.
Yes, he was also asking whether loss estimation of critical infrastructure is included in the model.
What is included in the model is there is a business interruption, which means that there is a loss estimation, and the loss of the business interruption, it's included in the infrastructures, because so we can estimate the level of functionalities. How much is the functional? Because if we take the infrastructures as the first element that is directly affected by a given risk, in order to go to cascading and get a better evaluation, you need to know what is the level of functionality of a given infrastructures. And one, for example, of qualitative evaluation, for example, that I show, I only said that if the level of water is bigger than 0.3 meter, then we assume that a given infrastructure is not functional. If it's less, then it is functional. All right. So the level of modeling for the capacity vulnerability, it is basically depend on the level of knowledge of the model that you have. So there is, if you provide a much more detailed, much more sophisticated model, then you get a better evaluation.
Okay, thank you very much. So there are a couple of questions. Chris, I think you can unmute yourself and you can put on your camera if you prefer now. So there are a couple of questions. One is by Hari Krishna. The return period based hazard intensity, which are based on long time historical data, are getting affected by the recent increase in intensity and frequency of occurrence of other hazards. How this aspect can be modeled in estimating more reliable return period based hazard intensities.
Thanks, Dina. Thanks, Hare Krishna, and thanks, Dr. Ghani, for a great talk. So I was listening. I couldn't speak earlier. I just didn't have the functionality. Sorry. With regards to the question, in the MEDiate project for the hazards, we're looking both at current and future. So the first step we're doing is to look through, as you referring to there, the long-term historical data to see that's where we have the data, of course, to see where what the return periods are. We're then comparing those to model output for the same period, for the same observed period, to see how they compare, and then transferring that same method across to future model projections as high resolution as we can. Again, depends, of course, on which hazards we're modeling as to what data we've got. But in that way, we're then comparing both what we've got for the historical period and then translating that into the future. There's a lot of work and some subtleties, of course, that go into that process to see whether the models themselves have the outputs and the capability to be able to calculate those return periods. But at the very high level, at the broad level, what we're doing is comparing observational model data and then turn this into future projections. I hope that answers that question.
I think
if I can add,
yes.
So it's important to, within this project, we are not developing the hazard. We are using the hazard as an input. Our focus is more on developing the interaction between the different hazard risk and the cascading. So this is the most of the focus of the project.
Thank you very much for Abdelghani. And indeed, we are also not specifically developing fragility models or vulnerability models. We are trying to identify the models that are available in literature that can best fit the case studies that we are considering, but also the interactions between hazards that we are considering. So yes, it's a very interesting fact-finding expedition. We have a question from Sohail Hassan. Again, it's on going back to the following up on the question on modulators. He's asking that from your experience, what is the best way to capture the different interdependencies between hazards and risks? Considering that in the industry, project teams tend to not have much time to spend on risk management and identifying the interdependencies, when there are a lot of risk it would therefore take a long time.
Well, I would say this is cost beneficial based analysis. So first of all, it depends on level of details that you have, and also time. Time is money. So it's I wouldn't say there is a best way. It's input output. There is no best way. So it's input output. So
yes, there are also some interdependencies.
There is always simplified approaches that you can use. For example, there was an example that we show, which is not really very I wouldn't say that it's too complex for the industry to do, but they have to prioritize what are the different components that they want to consider for this different interdependencies, at which level they want to go. It's the same thing when you want to analyze an infrastructures. Infrastructures has different components, different level of components, and the different components means different level of importance. So it's all about how detailed you want to go for this.
And what are the requests from stakeholders, which takes us to the next question from Abbas Fatih Azars. who's from the University of Genova, and it's working on multi-hazard risk reduction. It's thanking us for the interesting presentation, but can we please give some insight on the differences that you have experienced observed in implementation procedures, or specifically in stakeholders' view in different cities?
First of all, the project has only 1 year, so we just started. So we are at the stage to try to we are at the stage where we just finished the design of the system. So we have identified their preferences, priorities, but then we haven't reached the level or to test the system in their cities. So we are going to this direction for soon. So.
Thank you. Is there any other questions? Can we access the platform? I think this is for Barbara to respond to. Barbara, I'll promote you to panelist if you want to say something about it. And you can just unmute yourself and maybe also.
The microphone was mute, sorry.
Yes. I don't know if you can put on your camera or introduce yourself quickly.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Not at the time being, no, we are not ready to open it yet. Maybe only within the consortium in a few weeks, say a month time, but not yet outside the consortium.
Yeah.
However, we will have a specific presentation on the platform in the very relatively near future. And this will give everybody an opportunity to look into how something like that is developed and works. And then at a later stage, of course, like all European products will eventually become open for access to everybody.
So we are currently at the stage where, so very soon the platform will be shared with the stakeholders so that they can start already fill in their data and run the analysis. It's, I don't know which level of, how they call it, beta version, or it's still alpha version. So we are this stage for now, but then later, once we have collected, because the focus for now is to complete the platform, and this basically will highly depend on stakeholders' feedbacks. So once this is fixed and the whole system works, then obviously it will be open and anyone should be able to access and provide feedback for the general public or for the scientific community.
And there is one more question from Andreas Branner. For Chris, if Chris, you are still there. Did you find an increase in event and hazards in your data of the past? And if yes, how do you predict event and hazards for the future? So I assume this means magnitude and frequency.
Yeah, thanks, Andreas, for the question there. I can probably answer in a couple of different ways. So in some ways, there's kind of actually not so much the scope or the purpose of what we're trying to achieve here in the MEDiate project. Certainly from the hazard perspective, it's not so much accounting for how things perhaps have changed in the past, as more accounting for the interconnections and the relationships that exist between the hazards now in general, and then whether they may change in the future. So trends in past data is perhaps not something we have looked too closely at in the work so far. The second part of your question, though, which is around, well, how do we then move that into future projections? So I think a lot of the work that we've focused on with the hazards up to this point has been around trying to map the dependencies, so those interdependencies between hazards. We then use the same drivers, the same variables in both for historical period, but also in the future period. So if we're using climate projections, for example, if we're dealing with climatological, hydrological, meteorological type of hazards, then we'll use the same variables from the models and then redo that same dependencies type of calculation. to then see, does that relationship change in the future, and then does that change affect the return period, the magnitude or intensity of those events. So that's roughly the process we're going through. But in terms of a direct output, are we looking for trends in data? Not so much. It's more to compare, let's say, a historical period to a future period.
Thank you very much, Chris. And we have a question from Mohammed on what is the preferred methodology that can be used for temporal, spatial, multi-hazard risks and resilience analysis based on our experience. I don't know who wants to give a first stab at that. It's quite a complex question, and it really depends on the type of hazards that
I would say the same. I would say same. It depends again for type of hazards. So
yes.
Again, even the different, definitely when you do different methods, they will lead you to different results. This is something obvious. I think it's a matter. And I think instead of focusing on which better method, I would say focus on better modeling, improve the quality of your input data. So it's all a matter of the data rather than the methods. The methods are different. That will give you different results. Then yeah, of course, then you have the level of uncertainties. But mostly, I would say the focus is more on the data. So.
Yes, there is an issue of data. There is also an issue of methodology. There is an issue when you're looking at the temporal and spatial considerations there. You need to consider the fact that some hazards might have return. So for instance, for floods, we are considering return periods that are usually much shorter than we consider for earthquake. And therefore, when we consider the cumulative effect of these, you need to keep that into perspective in terms of the actual risk and resilience that this triggers in some type of infrastructure systems in a certain case, or in individual assets. For instance, in other case, there are some individual assets and some individual element and component of assets that might be much proner to some level of hazards rather than to others. So for instance, if we are looking at flooding might not create directly structural failures, but might deteriorate materials, might cause corrosion, or might cause loss of mortar or loss of integrity in concrete and so on. And then in time, that effect will be, if the properties are not particularly maintained, as often happen in infrastructures, then you find out that in the presence of an earthquake, that can have can then raise a substantial risk which would not otherwise have occurred, and make your resilience much weaker and your recovery much longer. So it's a matter of really considering the overall process and be as realistic as possible in considering all aspects of that process.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we don't have any more questions at this point. So I would like to thank very much Abdel for a very exhaustive presentation of the project. As we have said, we are just halfway through it, so you will have opportunity to listen to more and to more in-depth discussions on each of the project components on these same channels in the near future. I will also like to thank Chris and Barbara for contributing to the discussion, and as always to all our audience for listening and prompting us with very inciting questions. Thank you all, and we will see you next month on the 11th of April for the Philippine webinar. Thanks again, Abdelghani, for the presentation.
Thank
you. Bye-bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye.